In this episode, we talk about how the British government is likely in 2019 to say how many calories meals are allowed to contain. We look at recognition in the New Year's Honours list for the fight against modern slavery, and we stare into the face of genuine environmental extremism in the wake of the drone incidents at Gatwick Airport. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show for Changemakers. Here we are, standing poised on the edge of a new year, wondering what excitements, what tragedies, what triumphs await us in 2019. If you're considering how to face the future with your own renewed sense of purpose, wondering how to break that purpose down into your priorities for the next year, you may be interested to hear the most recent Mallen Baker podcast that talks about just that. If so, do make sure to subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes, because there'll be some truly fantastic interviews in 2019 you'll want to hear. Or you could just be trying to make sense of all the news of the last couple of weeks, some of which we'll cover here. First up is the news that the British government is considering introducing a calorie cap on meals bought from supermarkets and restaurants. 544 calories is the limit proposed for instant dinners. Not 545, not 550, but 544. That's a very specific number and considerably less than many of the ones currently on sale. Main courses at restaurants would be capped at 951 calories, sandwiches 550 calories, portions of chips 302 calories sold at the supermarket but 416 from restaurants. Vol au vents or onion barges would be restricted to 144 calories, pizzas will be kept to 928 calories, pies 695. Basically, the proposals aim to reduce calorie counts by 20% across all food groups. Health officials aim to finalise the plans next year and have them implemented by 2024. Now, I'm in favour of governments trying to work out what can be done to tackle the obesity crisis in our society, but mandating what people are allowed to eat is the most blockheaded way to achieve it. It's no surprise that Britain has been named as the second worst offender in the Nanny State Index, because in recent years its answer to all of these problems has been to introduce rules designed to protect us from ourselves. It currently is the sixth worst in the world for obesity rates, according to the OECD, which you could take as meaning that it has a more urgent problem to solve than many of us, or you could look at all of those countries that have lower rates of obesity and note that none of them have nanny state policies that made them that way. So maybe there are more effective approaches. In fact, we know there are more effective approaches. Amsterdam's Healthy Weight programme has made a real impact. One that comes from a local level programme to make healthier choices easier to make, to increase physical activity and help people to have good quality sleep. It works from the underlying causes of obesity at a psychological level, a lifestyle level and living and working conditions. The programme costs just 0.04% of the City of Amsterdam's budget and saw obesity rates fall over a 3-year period by a quarter in the most deprived group of children. Yes, the devil's in the detail. But all the more reason why simply telling people that they're too stupid to choose their own food, so the government's going to sort it out for them, not an approach that's likely to work with the people who need the most help. In my view, we have to get more sophisticated in how we aim to change society for the better than to lunge at laws that ban or restrict everything we don't like, thinking that will somehow solve the problem. Evidence is not good, but it actually works. The problem is people intuitively think it must be. They'll point to how bad the problem is and therefore think these measures must make sense. But it doesn't follow. Saying things are urgent doesn't answer the point that a proposed course of action isn't effective. But the health impacts of obesity are rising, and it's something we do need to address. The recently introduced sugar tax seems to have done little to change consumer behaviour, although it did lead some manufacturers to reduce sugar in their products in advance of its introduction. It seems to me that the problem is we have a poor food culture. People have lost the link with real food and are exercising their free choice to eat crap. Forcing manufacturers to have fewer calories in the crap doesn't seem to me to be the winning solution. The harder job of encouraging people to exercise that free choice to embrace a better food culture seems to be more likely to do the job. Next, talk about something I like. The fourth episode of the Mallen Baker podcast was an interview with Marketing Director and Head of Sustainability for Marshalls, Chris Harrop. As far as I'm concerned, Chris is one of the leading change makers in the corporate sector. Not only did he lead a risky but ultimately effective programme to tackle child labour in Marshall's Indian sandstone supply chain, but he latterly became a high-profile campaigner on modern slavery in the business sector. Why this is news is that he's just been recognised for that work with an OBE in the New Year's Honours list, and for me that's long overdue recognition. He chose to take action on some really ugly issues when some of his competitors, who knew full well about children working in dangerous conditions in Indian quarries, decided to sit on their hands and just see how things unfolded. Here's a short excerpt from my interview with Chris from the podcast. So what did you see when you went out there?
Very, very poor conditions, very unorganised sector, great product, great quarries, great stone in the ground, but lots of children working in conditions, no facilities at any quarries. So, no toilets, no health and safety, no real equipment. Just very, very unorganised. And I think probably the moment where it brought home to me is we went through an area that were taking spoil heaps and turning the spoil heaps, because the area in India, in Rajasthan, had been quarrying, 300-400 years, a bit like, UK Yorkstone, because it's a product of choice in that area of India. They were turning the product from the spoil heaps into new product, into smaller product. So on the face of it, you think that's great. Environmental sustainability, taking a used product and recycling it, repurposing, reusing it. But the vast majority of the workers in that area were children. So I think I turned a corner walking around through an area where I probably wasn't supposed to be, and just saw two kids on the side of the road making stone sets who actually were, I found out through the translator, were exactly the same age as my two girls at home at the same time. And it just struck me at that point, how can it be right that we consider bringing product in? It's a fantastic geological product, looks beautiful, that's been made by children who are exactly the same age as the children I've got at home, who I get very upset if they're not doing their homework. And these kids have no access to education, no access to healthcare, are being made to work in conditions on the side of a road and under the sun, and are open to all sorts of exploitation. So it's just wrong.
Next, on to something that I don't like at all. And that's how we've been shown the face of real environmental extremism. You'll be aware of the recent disruption there's been at London Gatwick Airport when a drone was spotted in dangerous proximity to planes taking off and landing there. 2 people were initially arrested, but then cleared of involvement, leaving the question open as to who was actually responsible. Because of a recent high profile of the environmental campaign calling itself the Extinction Rebellion, which I talked about in the last video, quite a few people speculated that the attack could have been carried out by environmental campaigners. Now, all decent environmentalists would find such a thing abhorrent. They'd not only balk at any action that put people's lives in danger, but they'd also recognise that seriously inconveniencing tens of thousands of ordinary people trying to get to families or go on holiday for the Christmas period, this would be seriously counterproductive. And to give Extinction Rebellion their due, they disclaimed any direct involvement, and we still don't know who did what. But that speculation did bring out the ugly face of genuine environmental extremism, people who would celebrate and support if that link turned out to be true. One activist, a leading light of the Extinction Rebellion movement, we won't name him here because I don't believe in giving publicity to such people, let's give him the code name of the Angry Donkey, made this tweet in response to a more moderate voice. Do you mean those killing future generations by taking unnecessary genocidal holiday flights from murderous Gatwick? So there you are, off on a holiday with your loved ones. Well, that makes you personally responsible for genocide. You're literally killing future generations by doing something considered entirely normal by the standards of your time. Now bear in mind, this isn't just some rando sounding off on Twitter, this is one of the very active campaigners in that movement. If you remember the last video, you'll remember I pointed out that if you go around telling people they're fighting against extinction, you will feed extremist positions that make it more likely that people will do stupid things. And that concern is made flesh in this tweet. Do you know why? Because no sane person would advocate violence against innocent people. But if by the simple act of choosing to fly, they have become culpable of genocide, well, that's a different story. If your movement holds them morally responsible for massive crimes against blameless future generations, then you can easily discount the inconvenience they suffer. They deserve it. And it's not much of a leap from there to say that it would be justified if one of those drones had brought down one of those planes. After all, who would really mourn a bunch of people that were guilty of genocide? That's how you become an extremist, when you work your mindset into the mode that makes a moral condemnation of everyone around you, so actions taken to hurt or kill those people becomes morally right in your warped, twisted worldview. Now maybe this individual, the angry donkey, would never dream of following his permanently angry perspective to its logical conclusion. He said he'd be against anyone being hurt, so I give him the benefit of the doubt for now, whilst recognising that extremists start on a journey at one place and often end up at another entirely. But then his perspective influences others, and eventually some angry, overzealous person does exactly that, then others decide that they too should follow suit, and before you know it, all of the good work done in gathering consensus behind the science of climate change, for behind-the-scenes battles to get significant shifts in how we thrive as a society while treading lightly on the planet, all of that becomes more difficult because in the popular imagination, those concerns become associated with crazy people doing harm to ordinary people. Great job, guys, really helping. Unfortunately, you don't need to be that extreme to make it harder to advance arguments based on sound science. The organisation Christian Aid, which in my experience has been one of the less robust campaign groups out there, recently released a report that purported to show the cost of disasters caused by climate change, intending to show how much extreme weather events will hit the societal bottom line. From a campaign point of view, might be an effective thing to do, helping us to understand the real impact climate change could focus the minds of decision makers. However, to do that, you have to put in the work and come up with something credible, and that's not playing to Christian Aid's strengths. Instead, they simply list some big weather events of the last year with no analytical support whatsoever as how likely that event was caused by climate change, then came up with an assessment of costs. So, for instance, the Kerala floods were included, but actually climate change is not considered to be amongst the causes of the Kerala floods, rather to do with land use, land cover changes, the encroachment of floodplains, reservoirs, storage and other factors. Serious but sceptical people will look at such documents and dismiss them out of hand because they've made no attempt to have robust data. But the headlines they generate will now be quoted over and over by campaigners who are too lazy to look at original data sources, and thereby making their case easy to attack, while they could have had a perfectly valid, more robust case if they just restricted themselves to what could factually be backed up. It's not as though there isn't a case to be made without the hyperbole. I just wish that the environmental movement generally would make a New Year's resolution to focus on robust data and see where that leads, rather than creating an ideology that has the incentive to mould the facts to fit its predetermined outcomes. I'm guessing that's asking too much, which is precisely why I've said before I'd like to see the more intellectual figures on the right grab the issue and make it their own, because nothing sharpens the attention to detail as much as good competition. That's my hope for 2019. That's all I have for now. If you're still here at this point, then you probably want to know when new videos get released. The best way to do that is to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications button. My name's Mallen Baker. See you next time.